Every single old person is thinking about how they will die and worried about dying badly. I like to say talking about death is like talking about sex, and you start at the edges. Don't jump in, boots and all, to start with. Start early before you think you need to. Start way before you think you need to, and give something of yourself. Some people have said to me, I cannot see. Life is worth living. And if someone says that, you say, why? Tell me more about that. Why? And they go, well, I got stuck in a cupboard as a kid and I'm scared of the dark. And you say, well, that has to go in your advanced care plan. Yeah. So that if you get nursed, you'll be nursed with the lights on.
One thing I love about what you do, you say that love is the underpinning aspect of this. Mm-hmm. And I've never heard advanced care plans or anything to do with planning for healthcare described in that way.
Look, you are writing a love letter to your people who matter the most to you, because you are taking a big burden off them. It is a matter of love for your family. They won't have to make these awkward decisions about you.
There are two certainties in life, according to Benjamin Franklin: death and taxes. Taxes we'll all pay, unless, of course, you're an expat living in Singapore, Dubai, maybe even Turkey. The rest of us will pay taxes. And death, we'll all face that, and we'll all face someone close to us dying. And one thing I've realized as I've got older is, for some of us, we will end up having a very important role in helping our parents navigate that. For some of us, it'll be a real privilege, and for some of us, it'll be a real challenge. And I have been personally navigating a conversation with my own mom on what are her desires from a health point of view, from a medical intervention point of view, as she gets older. It's a difficult conversation because many of us don't want to have it. What I've also realized in that process is the conversation isn't actually for old people. The conversation is one for anybody in their 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s. Because all of us might actually be a victim of a car accident, a motorbike accident, unexpected surgery, and suddenly find ourselves being done to. The medical system will do whatever it can and use any kind of intervention because it has to and it knows how to, whether you want that to happen or not. And the only way to have agency in this conversation with your future health needs is to have pre-decided what kind of intervention you don't want to have. Because the health system, i.e. doctors who are doing their best, have an oath that they have to fulfill. So I invited Dr. Merran Cooper onto the show today. Merran is a really, really interesting and unusual person. She decided to become a doctor at age 50. She became a palliative care doctor in her late 50s, and she started a business in her 60s to do just that, help people to document what they want to do, what they want to have done to them, what decisions they want to be a part of or made on their behalf, if and when they need medical intervention. It's a fascinating conversation, and whether you're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, or your 60s, I encourage you to listen to it. And at the end of the conversation, I'm going to share with you a few thoughts, a few reflections, and one or two actions you may want to take.
From our studio in Jones Bay Wharf, Sydney, here's Pod O'Sullivan with Don't Let the Old Man In, a podcast from the Wisdom Vault.
Let's start here. I'm so excited to talk to you about advanced care plans and you deciding to become a doctor in your mid-50s and then an entrepreneur after that, which is quite extraordinary. But I want to start with a story or an experience of your life when you were much younger. When you were 21 and your husband was 24, he was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and you have said and you've told me that he had a good death. And a lot of that was impacted by a really important conversation a chaplain had with you and him. Can you tell us about that and the impact the conversation did have?
Exactly. I was 21, he was 22 when he was diagnosed. I was 23, he was 24 when he eventually died. And so a young, strong man suddenly became very weak. His hair fell out, skinny. I had to bath him, major transformation of a person. And he had 11 months of chemotherapy and full body radiotherapy on day one.
Right.
And from thereafter, it was 11 months of vomiting, diarrhea, the works. And at the end of it, after 9 or 10 months, he had a bone marrow transplant, which back then was traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And
traumatic because of the pain?
Well, it was very new.
Yep.
They didn't have the drugs back then that they have now.
Yep.
I was the only person allowed to visit him. I had to wear the hat, gown, everything. It was in St. Vincent's Clinic, and everybody went into that corridor, and not everybody came out. Yep. And we knew that was the name. So at the end of the first bone marrow transplant, his only bone marrow transplant, the doctor came in and literally stood at the end of the bed and said, "I'm sorry, but the leukemic cells have come back, which means the bone marrow transplant hasn't worked. If you do nothing, you've got 3 weeks. If you have more chemo, you've got 3 months. Or you can have another bone marrow transplant. So what would you like to do?" And he said, "I just want to go home. I want to get out of here." And he wanted to have another bone marrow transplant.
Okay.
So, go home, drink all this TPN, do what you can. Merran will look after you, eat what you can and get fit and come back in for another bone marrow transplant. So he came home to my parents' house and he continued to wither away. And a chaplain came. He happened to be a chaplain. He was a friend of Mark's parents.
Okay.
So he was kind of used to having these conversations. He seemed older. He was probably only in his 40s at the time.
But that's all of you.
And he came, and I'll never forget it. He sat in the lounge chair, and Mark and I were on the lounge. And he said, "Mark, whether you have got 3 weeks or 3 months or 30 years, what no one is saying is you will die. So prepare for that. Talk to your God, get angry, tell Merran you love her, and at the same time, get ready to have another bone marrow transplant."
Wow. That's extraordinary conversation.
It was. Nobody had mentioned the D word until then. And I think in the weeks after, he had more conversations with Mark. I know he did because they mentioned at the funeral, but I don't remember them. So they did it unbeknownst to me. Okay. And I think the importance of all of that was around 3 things. This concept of prepare for dying and be hoping for the best. Yeah. It's commonly said, prepare for the worst but hope for the best. But it's not just vague hope. It is doing both things 100%. Yeah. 100%, both at the same time. And then...
What's that like?
Yeah. Well, I haven't had to do it for myself yet. Yeah. I do it to a degree on most days of my life.
And you see many people doing this exact same thing.
Yeah, well, I've had my eyes open to that concept. So therefore, when you're looking for yellow cars, you see yellow cars. So therefore, I've seen it in my life a lot when others might not have noticed it. But with Mark, it was absolutely life-changing. I get goosebumps thinking about it now because he changed. He did not lose hope at all until the day he died. He was going to have that bone marrow transplant again. But also at the same time, he became, I think about it as an arrowhead, he became far more leading the way of how every day would play out, and we followed suit. It's like he had an arrow and he pointed in that direction and we followed in that wake, doing all the things for him, but he was very much leading the way.
So his wishes were leading the way.
Absolutely. Without even saying anything, it kind of permeates the air. Who's the boss here? Mark. And that's a good way of dying. So on the day he died, there were some extraordinary circumstances, but ultimately the other thing that I learned was, I was 20-something. I knew nothing about dying or how to care for somebody. And I had tried to be positive. Be positive. You've got to be positive, Merran. That's all I heard for all those 11 months.
From yourself or from people around you?
Doctors, everybody.
Right.
You must be positive.
Which means they're focusing on one pathway.
Well, I get it. You must be positive, and that worked for us, tough as it was for me. But he never saw me cry until on his deathbed. And I was bawling in front of him as he was taking his last breaths. And he said, "Mezzy, you're so soothing." Who knew? Like, being so authentic, crying in front of somebody is actually what was soothing. So the concept about ambivalence and also the concept about just, there's a lovely saying called, be a soul, not a role.
Be a soul, not a role.
Don't be the wife. Don't be the carer. Don't be the older brother. Bring your whole self, be your whole soul. And I think that's what I was in that moment, not knowing it, but I couldn't hold back anymore. I was just his grieving other half.
The chaplain who had the conversation with you clearly impacted both of you enormously, but impacted the way you leaned into the next number of months. How did it impact you afterwards?
Badly. I fell into a hole.
Okay.
Yeah. So I learned about dying. I certainly learned about grieving. I did fall into a hole, and of course, there's no shoulds about it, but of course I did. Why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
And why wouldn't anybody? You fall into a big black hole, and you just hope there's somebody to catch you, help you pad the landing a bit. I read C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that book.
It's an extraordinary book.
And what's extraordinary about it was here's this incredibly intelligent man writing things like, forget everything I said last chapter. I don't feel that anymore. I feel something different.
That's right. Yeah.
And that meant so much to me because that was
your experience.
Nobody has it together.
Yeah.
And so I did learn a mess is okay. It's messy. There's no 7 ordered steps. You can't judge anybody. If C.S. Lewis gets it wrong, we're all going to get it wrong.
The thing, I remember reading that book a number of years ago when my best friend died. And it was a complete shock to me and to everybody around him. What I took from the book, which made no sense to me beforehand, but it made a lot of sense reading the book and since then, that is that none of us grieve the same way. Yeah. And none of us even understand how we are grieving in the moment. And you've just got to sit with it, knowing that it's going to wash over you unexpectedly at times, sometimes like a little trickle of water, sometimes like a massive wave. But it'll come at you when it will come at you, not when you want it to. And you've just got to just be with it. And it will pass.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe it will pass, maybe it won't. Maybe you just live with it. There are absolutely no absolutes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I suppose I was privileged to feel that mess early in my life and also very privileged to be there at the bedside of somebody dying early in my life because I think it's made me less afraid. It's not the unknown to me. And I have attempted over the years to be there when I can for other people in a non-judgmental way. Yeah. And that means that I've seen different sorts of griefs, different sorts of deaths, and they're all very different. And the other thing I've done is I've trained as a death doula. And actually I did my first training in it the weekend before my final med exams.
Was that
I
right?
don't know why, but I decided to take the weekend off. I'm like,
I think we know your personality
crazy.
style.
But it was important to me, and it was important to me, this concept of just being there and letting the other person be there. And it's the rules, there's no rules.
Yeah. I experienced a lot of death and grief when I was very young too, but for different reasons. Because as you know, my first career a long, long time ago was in intensive care nursing. And as a student nurse in Ireland, probably wisely, just didn't feel like it at the time, when someone in the ward or the unit was at that stage, the older nurse would go, you go and spend time with them. This is important for your development or your training. And what they really meant was you need to get used to this because this is part of that particular job and that profession. But also I remember, back to your comment about be a soul, not a role, which I love that comment. This wise old nurse said to me once, yes, you have a role, but at the end of the day, be a human being beside this person and help this person to pass in whatever way they need to. And I've never forgotten that comment. It gave me permission to stop trying to think, what's the right thing to do here, and just to be here, which is extraordinarily useful trait or extraordinarily useful offering to be able to give to someone.
Yeah, well, that's what I learned in the death drill. I'm not saying I got good at it, but it's certainly what they tried to teach us. Yeah. And I learned from the best. I learned from a man called Dr. Michael Barbado, who was a palliative care physician. And he said things like, just be there. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to say. Just be there. And he also spoke about the importance of silence. Pause. And I also learned and read the 5 invitations.
Yes.
By Frank Ostaseski.
Yes.
And they are that book is where I read the words, don't be a role, be a soul.
Right.
It's a great book. So the things that you learn around being when people are dying, grieving, supporting other people, helping them dying, you can barely learn anywhere else, I don't think.
I want to move on, but before I do, there's one question I do want to ask you, and that is, anyone losing their spouse at any age of life is a hard and sorrowful moment. You were very young, and that should never happen to any of us, but it does.
Yeah.
What did you, like that whole experience, once you came out of the immediate grieving process and you started rebuilding your life, how did you view life, having been through and exposed to death so early?
I don't think I learned a lot about life.
Okay.
I think I learned a lot about dying, about grieving, but I didn't learn much. I was in the wilderness for quite a long time,
right,
to be frank. I didn't come out of that period of grieving and say, right, now I'm going to do this and climb the mountain or succeed at all. I chose to make some decisions around just filling in time. I mean, I was still young. I had some good guidance from my parents who said, get a job, pay rent, do the same as what the rest of your age group are doing, which is get a job, pay some rent, don't go crazy, get some discipline. But back then we had no palliative care, no grief care, no nothing. I had nothing. And I travelled. I got a few different jobs. I went and lived in a few different places. And I continued to make mistakes and learn about life slowly over time, the same as anybody else. So it didn't seem to set me aside at all.
You were doing life.
I was just doing life normally. So, I mean, what does that mean? That means some people might have experienced a lot of stuff and still not learned.
Of course.
And others, I remember, when I was grieving, had never experienced anything like what I'd been through, but they were helpful because they didn't bring judgment or experience or knowledge. They just brought themselves. So I've just gone on to live my life as well or poorly as any other flawed person.
Well, you have done a few fascinating things, and that is you started your medical to become a doctor training at Sydney University when you turned 50.
Yeah.
And your website, and I've listened to some interviews where you've said this, is that was 32 years after being offered the degree, right? That's a long gap year.
Yeah.
That's a long gap year.
Yeah.
What was it like starting medicine at that age of your life?
Totally exciting.
Was it?
I really wanted to do it. I loved the body. I loved learning about the body. On day one, I was 51 and the girl sitting next to me was 21. I'll never forget it in the lecture theatre, because we went to lectures 10 years ago.
Right. This is pre-COVID.
I was up in the back. I was trying to kind of fly under the radar a little, and my kids said, "Mum, don't ask questions. Don't be that old person."
How old were your kids then?
Well, my daughter was also first year uni. So one time I was coming out of a lecture theatre and she was going in. They said, just don't be the old person who's...
Don't embarrass us.
Yeah. And so somebody was saying, there's people from all around the world in this cohort, and the ages range from 21 to a lot more than that. And I sort of thought, that's me. That's me. But it didn't matter. There was... we were just so interested in the body and learning that nobody seemed to... They were just so welcoming. I did learn to shut up a bit, because we used to have groups, problem-solving groups or something like that they were called, and study groups. And by the time you're 51, you've done some stuff.
That's right.
You know, and so somebody might say, I'm going to Italy, and I'd like, I've been there. Or I'm going to buy a car, and I'm like, I had one of those once. And then I thought, oh God.
Yeah, I sound like their parents.
Yeah, shut up. And so whether I did successfully shut up or not, I tried to. But there were some very funny life moments. I remember sitting next to another guy who had started older, but he was still only maybe late 20s or early 30s. And he said to me in the middle of the lecture theatre, I've just had my second kid. Oh, congratulations, great. He said, I've got to go and buy a car. I said, what are you getting? He said, a station wagon. You know, there are some things where you can just nod your head, keep your mouth shut, nod your head. There was one time when I was first year out, and there was another person, another older woman actually, who said, what are you doing? She said, you're too old to be a doctor. You're too old to be an intern. How old are you? She said, across the ward, and everybody was listening. That was the one and only time anybody hinted.
As a fellow traveller.
As a fellow traveller, maybe. But I did sort of kind of give myself an out. So people would say, what sort of doctoring do you want to do? And I said palliative care. And then they went, oh, that's okay. Then you could almost hear them going, oh, that makes sense.
Was that your intention from day one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
palliative care had emerged, of course, as
and that's why I'd done the death doula training. I was like, I want to do palliative care. And then what happened was, on the wards, I was truly shocked and saw so much bad dying that I thought there might be something we could do to prevent bad dying rather than help lots of individual people die well.
Yeah. You and I both shared experiences of working in ICU as part of our various experiences, and I was reminded of some of my experiences talking to you a couple of days ago about how many of the family conversations emerge in that little family room outside the doors of ICU while their loved one is inside on a ventilator, be it from trauma or surgery or whatever. And now suddenly the issues around what does our loved one want? Does anyone know? And that can often be a really good conversation, but usually it's not. And I imagine this is where you started experiencing what led you to do what you're now doing.
Yeah. Look, you've probably had in sum total more of those conversations than I have. And often it is not the doctors having the conversations. So many times I was a 50-year-old junior doctor, female, and there might be an 80-year-old lady in the bed. The doctor walks in, they're 35.
Yep.
They've probably had never had a day off work since they started med school. And they'll come in and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Right, doctor, whatever you think, doctor. And out they go. And then the little old lady would turn to me and say,
what do you think?
Oh, no. What did he say?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I haven't had my hearing aids in. And he's just booked her up for some sort of massive life-saving. And then, or they burst into tears and they would say, I never wanted this. They have absolutely no power. One really crucial day, and because your audience are male, it struck me one time, it was a Saturday morning, I was rounding with a respiratory specialist. And the previous night, a little lady had come in, you'd know all about 87, and she's got pneumonia. She's come in from a nursing home. And the treatment for pneumonia is very recipe-driven.
Yep.
And the guidelines for an 87-year-old lady are going to be the same as for a 19-year-old footballer.
Yes. But the lifestyle is very different.
Yeah, and the doctor has to follow them because we live in a litigious society.
Yeah.
Friend of mine, I don't want to get sued. I don't want to end up saying, why did I let this person die? So the treatment is put a nasogastric tube down her so that she's not going to eat or drink and make it go down the wrong way and give her worse pneumonia. So it's 11 p.m. She's had a day in emergency. She's exhausted. And the junior doctors who've never done nasogastric tubes are on duty.
Yeah, not practicing.
And they're practicing, and she's a good one to practice on.
Yeah.
And you get it wrong, so you pull it out and you put it down again. It's just horrific.
Yeah.
And it goes on after hours when nobody sees.
That's right.
So we walked into this lady's bedroom and she was not very conscious. She didn't have an NG tube in because she'd pulled 2 out the previous night.
Yeah.
And the respiratory specialist said to her son, who was a very, he was a successful, articulate, well-spoken gentleman who was sitting in the corner while his mother was asleep. And the respiratory specialist said to him, "Sir, would you mind if we used a small amount of restraint with your mother so that she doesn't pull the next tubes out?" Meaning tie her hands down.
Yeah.
And he said, "Yes, I would mind. Don't do that. Sit her up, give her sips of taste for pleasure. She loves a sip of milky tea. And if it goes down the wrong way, that's okay. But don't nurse her flat on her back and don't hold her hands down." And that's advanced care planning.
Yeah.
On behalf of, because that man knew his mother and he was empowered enough to speak up to a specialist on the spot.
And he had the confidence to do so.
And also, he had the confidence to, and that is what a lot of your listeners can bring to this space. Not kowtowing to doctors, but being very polite, very respectful, and say, thank you for asking. This is what we want you to do.
Yeah. And let's be clear, the medical system is set up for the best of intentions, and doctors are there doing the best they possibly can. And as you quite rightly said, you're a young intern or a specialist or a resident or a senior resident, and you're now in your hour 25 of the last 24 hours, and you've got to do it. You're going to do what you have to do. But just because we can do it doesn't mean we should do it.
Absolutely.
So you've mentioned advanced care plans. This is what you're now doing, which it's a fantastic area to be involved with, and someone with your experience is just the right person to be doing this. For those of us who have not been exposed either to our own lives or indeed where our own parents are not yet at this stage, what is an advanced care plan?
An advanced care plan is when you put into place your wishes for the medical care you do want and the medical care you don't want in the future. And it will only be used when you can no longer speak or make decisions for yourself. It can include, it's a process. Nobody ever says it's just a document. Nobody ever says it's just a conversation, but it's some way of thinking about what might happen, trying to create a picture of yourself, your values and preferences, share that with the people who are going to be making those decisions about you so that the care you get is what you would have wanted.
Is that different to a living will, or is it a
Not
similar
really.
thing? Same idea.
Same thing.
And it's specifically around healthcare, as opposed to the broader will.
As opposed to the broader will. Yeah, advanced care planning is about medical decisions. And those medical decisions can be not just the treatments you're going to get, but where you're going to get them. If you want to stay at home, you never want to go in an ambulance again. Your residential aged care home might be your home.
Yep.
Familiar places, familiar faces, you want to stay there. Because and if it's your mum, when you move, if you've got a little bit of dementia, when you move, when the lights are on 24/7, unfamiliar faces, you haven't eaten because you've been transferred, 12 hours of dehydration, you very likely go into a delirium, which is like an acute on top of your chronic dementia. And that's when shit can happen.
Yeah. And it's not just confusion, it can be agitation on top of confusion, which is why people pull out the NG tubes and whatever else they're doing, which in itself can cause a lot of anxiety to family members who have never seen their mom or their dad behave irrationally or behave like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I love about what you do, you say that love is the underpinning aspect of this. And I've never heard advanced care plans or anything to do with planning for healthcare described in that way.
Look, you are writing a love letter to your people who matter the most to you, because you are taking a big burden off them. It is a matter of love for your family. They won't have to make these awkward decisions about you. You're saying what matters most to me, and you're saying it to the people who matter most. And that is about love for you, love for life, love for them. You don't need training in how to do that.
But what you offer in Touchstone Life Care is a process to help people, guide them through.
Yeah.
If you want to do this, here's how you go about doing it.
Yes, so we are just a small piece in the jigsaw puzzle. There's lots of people who can hold your hand and help you have conversations. There are lots of sort of conversation guides, aids out there for you. But along the journey for me becoming a doctor, I was a physio and I had a whole lot of neck surgery and had to quit being a physio, ended up teaching science, and then I ended up learning about genetics and teaching that to science teachers and to doctors.
Okay.
That was like an interim. It was a very exciting time, early 2000s, when they just done the genome and mapped the genome. I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
And people were finding out whether or not they had the gene for breast cancer. We called it the BRCA gene. And if you had the gene for breast cancer, were you going to have a mastectomy preventatively and have your ovaries out preventatively? Those sorts of decisions. So I got involved in making decision aids for people.
Ah, okay.
Isn't it interesting how these things come out? One thing leads to another.
Yeah.
And we were teaching doctors how to break bad news about that. And that was actually the straw that broke my back. I said, I don't want to teach the doctors, I want to be the doctor. So those decision aids, what we learned about best practice decision making, because it's very hard to think about the future, was you break big decisions down into little ones. And it's always a good idea to use the present tense so that you see an avatar of yourself. And it's like, I cannot talk to anyone. Is life worth living? How is that good, bad, or ugly for me? Or do I not care? And just go through all the little scenarios. Some might be things like, I have no control of my bladder. How do I feel about that? Might not matter. I have no control of my bowels. How do I feel about that? It's okay if I have a stoma bag that I can manage. How do I feel about not being able to speak to somebody? I cannot speak to somebody. Life is worth living or not? Yeah, it's worth living so long as I can communicate in this way. Some people have said to me, I cannot see. Life is worth living. No, it's not. It's not worth living. And if someone says that, you say, why? Tell me more about that. Why? And they go, well, I got stuck in a cupboard as a kid and I'm scared of the dark. And you say, well, that has to go in your advanced care plan.
Yeah.
So that if you get nursed, you'll be nursed with the lights on.
Yes.
So all we're doing with Touchstone, we created a self-reflective questionnaire using these best practice decision-making conversation guides, and you work your way through these scenarios in the present tense, and that's all it is.
Do you recommend the person filling it in does it by themselves, or are they doing it in conjunction with their family, so the family is aware of their thinking process?
You do it any old how you like.
Right.
So my mother said, I want to have a big family dinner. I want to cook for everybody. I want everybody around the table. And my dad said, I will have a conversation with you one-on-one each. So it's very individual. Some people will say, not me, I'm not talking about it. Fine. So long as it's their choice. Yeah. So Touchstone was designed to try to have people think about medical scenarios that may or may not happen in the future, to generate a document that reflects you, your uniqueness, that others can use to make decisions about you as if they were you. Yeah. But it's become far more than that. So in various states and in different situations, you might be encouraged to fill out a particular form for that state directive form. Right. And that's okay. You can use a questionnaire as a pre-form filling out exercise. Yep. And then it's just now, a document management platform to manage those documents and most importantly, share them with the people ahead of time, and then use our integrations to share them with My Health Record and the Greater Health setting.
I would imagine, having watched various families trying to make decisions on behalf of their parent or their brother or their sister or whatever the loved one is, with the best of intentions, people come at that conversation through their own lenses, their own beliefs. I believe that we should always stay forever. I believe that we should be practical, whatever the belief is. I'm imagining what you have on offer allows that lens of belief-driven thinking to be put aside because the person's own wishes are there. Have you seen examples of potential family conflict just dissipate because?
Yes. Yeah. It's a hard one to gather up because people don't want to tell you what happened. They've moved on, but a few times they have. So some examples are even with younger people. So a younger man, a near drowning as a surfer, he took a long time to be resuscitated. He had a blended family around him and they had to make decisions in ICU about turning machines on or off. He ended up having some other long-term conditions. And they actually said, who knew him scrolling on his phone that afternoon 2 years ago would have been so important for us to be able to know what to do. Evidence, information. I mean, I'm sure many of your listeners know you need good information to make good decisions. Yes. So that's all this is. Yeah. People with another man with MND, so he had complete sort of cognition, but he couldn't speak. Yes. And his carers, his home carers, his family knew they were doing what he wanted because he'd taken time. It's not a once-off advanced care planning. You edit it. Okay. And improve and add to it.
And evolves and
and you might add details. Yeah. So they knew what care exactly. They said we all knew. I think we all know is a really good place to be. Others have had a stroke. A little old lady had a stroke on a table. She didn't expect to have a stroke while having surgery, and she woke up in ICU and a severe stroke. So you've got one member of the family who wants her to have full recovery. It's going to be 10 years of never-ending care. And other people have had a conversation with that mum. And she had a Touchstone directive that said, I refuse consent for certain things in these instances. And the doctors were able to say, this is her wishes. Yeah. It's not about you. Yeah.
And I think that line you just said is so important. It's family members, when one of their loved ones are seriously ill, they're also grieving themselves, and they're grieving for, I might be losing this person. And for many of us, we put that first and foremost without even realizing we're doing that. Back to our early conversation, we grieve in many different ways. And for someone to be able to go, your mom or your dad or your brother, your sister, or God forbid your child has already suggested this is what they want and don't want, that is all we're following. There's a huge relief in that, I would imagine, for a lot of people.
Yes, there is a huge relief. I remember one family in the ICU room, like you said. I was a student at the time, and their mother was being kept alive and intubated. And there was a youngest family member saying exactly what you said. I'm not ready to say goodbye. And that was what was holding up the whole process. So that's not really the time to be doing counselling to that kid. But if you have wishes, then you have to deal with those wishes, and then you can counsel the person in their grieving process. But in that same ICU department, there was another lady who'd been intubated following a severe pneumonia, and then she'd been woken up again, right? Yeah. And she said to me when she was leaving ICU how she hated it when she was unconscious. She wouldn't have been as deeply sedated as this other lady, but she did say, I felt like I'd been abducted by aliens and I was being traumatised. And I remember thinking, this other little lady is in there while her family are arguing about her. We need to think about what we're putting our loved ones through sometimes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. For those of us who don't like filling in forms, is there a fast version of this? And is there, like, from a language point of view, because I'm imagining, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm imagining men and women might gravitate towards certain languages slightly differently, or is that true?
It is about describing yourself. So you use whatever words. So this gentleman, this surfer, he said, a minimum quality of life for me is to be able to get to the RSL club 4:00 every afternoon and have a beer with my friends. Right. And the family said he'll be able to do that in a wheelchair.
Okay.
So write what matters to you. So, with our questionnaire, there's questions, but there's a lot of free text. Right. And you use the questions to prompt you to come up with your own individual uniqueness. This represents a minimum quality of life for me.
If I can't get there and have a beer with my friends, then I want to make a different decision.
Life is not worth living for me in those instances. But you're quite right about language and culture. So we do have some multilingual capacity in this system. There's many forms that come in different languages, but it's never just about translating the words. It's about cultural appropriate. Obviously, within Indigenous cultures in Australia, we talk about mob and finishing up, and there's different, going back to country, there are different things that you're going to talk about and want to talk about. Different cultures, the Chinese culture is different again, and the way they bring these conversations up. There used to be a sense of guilt if you'd got a gene that you'd given to another member of the family, then you felt a bit guilty about that, so you didn't talk about it. In different cultures, there's got a whole lot of different ramifications. So we try to work with cultures and change the wording or the way the questions are presented.
Right. But it sounds like the person themselves still has huge autonomy.
100%.
In fact, that's the whole point of it.
It's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
It's the whole point of it. Who are you? What do you want? What don't you want?
That's simple and that profound.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, it also forces all of us to go, who am I? And what do I want?
That's the kicker. Yeah. I mean, if your phone rang right now and it was emergency and they said, your mum is in the hospital, she's had a fall, she's unconscious, do you know whether she wants resus or not? Do you know what care she wants? And can you send us a document to prove it now from your pocket? That's what you can do with Touchstone. That's what you should be able to do. And the kicker is tomorrow, would everybody else in your family agree with what you just said?
That's the part. Yeah. Yes, I don't want to be that conversation tomorrow, but yes, I have thought about that conversation a lot, actually.
Look, I've had people say to me, I was driving home in the car, 3 kids in the back car. I got the call for emergency saying, what do you think your father wants us to do?
Yeah. I've had an ongoing conversation with my kids for, well, the oldest is now 24. As I've been telling her since she was about 10. I said, if ever I'm in hospital and if ever I'm unconscious, I only want one pillow. And do not put it below my shoulder because I hate it. Yeah. So they all know if everything's there, right? So I need to go the next step and fill in the whole form. Right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to pause for 1 second. If you've got this far, that means you must be enjoying the show. Thank you for watching. We have a plan to build out a whole lot more shows just like this. And to do so, we need your help. The platform amplifies shows that have higher eyeballs and subscriptions. So to help us attract guests that you will find very interesting, please press like and subscribe. That way, we can attract the guests that you want, and we won't let the old man in. Now, on with the show. If you had, imagine this, if you had, let's say $5 million to help change behaviors around advanced care planning, to encourage people to move in that direction more, what would you target?
Men's sheds, just ordinary places. I go to council groups, flower arranging days, men's sheds. Sometimes there'll be a group, put on by the Parkinson's people, and you stand up and say, Merran's here to talk about advanced care planning, and everyone's shaking in their shoes. By the end of it, 100% will say, thank you for bringing this up. I've been wanting to have a conversation, been trying, my daughter won't let me. It becomes intergenerational. So I would try to normalize it. I would say anybody can have these conversations, and I would make them available at the gym, on the bus. You should be able to do an advanced care plan on your phone on the commute. Like, don't make it something special.
That's really interesting. When I think of our audience, we have a range of folks. So folks who are, say, heading into retirement, and therefore this is really prominent for them, for themselves. We also have a whole range of folks who are now starting to take care of their parents, so the classic, sandwich generation. What advice would you give to us in terms of how do we have the conversation with our parents, in terms of bring that conversation up?
Well, I'm not good at it myself. I tried with my parents and I did have an excuse. So I said, let me try something on you. It is so hard because these roles of ours get in the way. So we've done some research at Touchstone. Why haven't you had the conversation? And the answers vary from it's not my role in the family to we just don't talk in my family.
Our family doesn't do that.
Our family doesn't do that. But there's sort of these rules around what we do and don't talk about. So the way I would approach it is I like to say talking about death is like talking about sex, and you start at the edges. Don't jump in, boots and all, to start with. Start early before you think you need to. Start way before you think you need to, and give something of yourself first. So, Mum, Dad, I've been thinking about some things, and this is what I've been thinking. And just talk about yourself first, and after a little while, they might talk about themselves. So, some ideas that go down okay are, if you're very authentic and you speak from your own feelings, there's no shoulds, there's no judgment. So it's around things like, Mum, I'm sorry, I can't help but notice you're getting a bit weaker. And I know you might not want to talk about this, but it worries me. And I'm worried that if the doctors, you have a fall, let's say, the doctors call me, I won't know what to tell them you want. Can you help me know what you would want me to tell the doctors if you had a fall? Maybe just a fall, not died, or just
start there.
Yeah. And that's very authentic. You're not saying, I need you to tell me. Let's do an advanced care plan. Like lawyers will say, look, let's do your will, and we're going to do an advanced care plan as well. Here's the form, fill it in. if it's a little bit cautious, Mum, I know this might be a bit hard, but we've got a half an hour, we've got a cup of tea in front of us. There's a couple of things that have been worrying me, and I want to ask you about them. Is that okay? Yeah, what is it? And look, I'm worried that something might happen to you, or I've been thinking about how you looked after your mum when she got old. And you told me about that once. Can you tell me, I'd really like to know more about that. What was that like for you? And then she will say things like, I hated every minute of it, or I didn't like it when I had to wash her. Why? What was it about that you didn't like? Well, it was so demeaning for her.
For her. As in her mom.
Yeah, she might be speaking. And so, oh, yeah, I can imagine. So you ease your way in, to, always authentic. My friend's just had an accident. His father died. I've got to tell you, it shook me up. It really did. And I want to get to know you more. We haven't really ever had that. So you can be quite out there.
Yeah.
But from a place of, I'm a little bit unsure how this is going to go. I just want to try to be real. If you don't have that much of a relationship with your people, then good luck. Yeah. I mean, try to build the relationship while you can so that you can at least try.
I love what you said there about, to start with, if you had a fall.
Yeah.
That's such a common concern for us as we get older, but such a common incident, and it's easy to get into the conversation with and then go from there.
I can reassure you, though, every single old person is thinking about how they will die and worried about dying badly. And I know that because when my father died in a retirement village, I went around his neighbours and let them know he had died in his sleep. 100% said, oh, I hope I go that way. Every single person. And they would get into a conversation. So don't think that they're not already thinking about it.
I bumped into a couple recently who were neighbours of mine, and we go to the same church. And I just noticed that he was hobbling a bit. And I said to him after, I noticed you're limping. Is something wrong? He said, I'm just getting old. And then he said, I realised last week I'm 76. That's the year my dad died. He was 76. And I told Marg, my wife, that, hey, guess what? I've just realised this morning I'm 76. That's how old my dad was when he died. Do you know what her reply was? And then she started laughing. She goes, he was so old when he died. That's what I thought as a young, 40-year-old woman. Now my husband's that age. And they were laughing about the idea. But when I spoke to him the next day, he said, I'm actually now starting to think about what it'd be like for me.
Yeah, I think,
your point.
Yeah, you do get these opportunities. Like, when you're looking for a yellow car, you see a yellow car. When you're got your ears out for these opportunities, they will arise. And so, yeah, I can imagine that would get you thinking. Tell me what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're in a completely different space.
Absolutely. Speaking of in a completely different space, I'm imagining if you walk into a gym or a men's shed and you say, let's talk about that like we talk about sex, you got everyone's attention very, very quickly. For those listening here today, so let's say you're a man in mid-40s or 50s, what would you tell us to do right now?
I would say go to touchstonelifecare.com because it's not perfect, but I would say click on the self-reflective questionnaire.
Yeah.
You can use a code. You can use a Don't Let the Old Man In code. I would go and do the self-reflective questionnaire because you don't have to share it with anybody. You can just go through the questions.
Yeah, just to help you think through it.
Because people get a bit scared. If I sign this form, oh my God, what does that mean? So just have a go and you'll see what matters to you and what doesn't. And then I would say to your family something using whatever words or techniques you've used in your career. Like if you've been a boss, you're used to having difficult conversations. Even if you have asked for a pay rise, when we've all had difficult conversations. Yeah. And so you might go to Touchstone Life Care, do a self-reflective questionnaire, or Google advanced care planning and have a look at the forms and just scroll through the questions and then figure out what matters to you. Top 3. And then say to your family, you know what, guys? I have got some things I want to talk with you about using whatever language you've used in your past life.
Yeah.
Not ready to talk about them now, but I want to make a time. So I'm going to send an invite to everybody a Tuesday night or our next Sunday night dinner, or I want you to come around for dinner, or I'm going to meet you at the pub. We're going to have a game of golf. We're going to, and remember when you taught your kids to drive, they sat next to you, nobody looked at each other, but you had some great conversations. Yes. Let's go and have a game of golf, let's play squash, let's go for a surf, whatever it is, get out there and say, you know, I've been thinking a couple of things and I want you to know. That's it. And then later you might formalise them in a document. And often the person that you might formalise them in a document with is your financial planner, your wealth advisor, your life coach. Yeah. It's not necessarily a doctor or your lawyer. Yeah. Often we're much better at talking, financial planners are good at talking about money.
Yes.
And they'll say, you need this much money, how long are you going to live for? Okay, if this is how long you're going to live for. You need an advanced care plan. Do one now. And you go, I know about that. I've got some things to say. So use your resources. Use the way you talk about anything important for anybody else. Don't make it special.
And that's I think that's really important. Is this is about you. This is about what do you want. And of course, for most of us, it's not a conversation we've had with ourselves to start with.
No.
And that self-reflective document that you refer to allows you to at least have the conversation with yourself. Then you choose whether to go and have it with other people. But as you just said,
well, look, one thing we do live in a world where we have incredible medical interventions, and that is fantastic. But it means you need to be smart. Like, don't be stupid. There's a great saying that says, pray to God, but row away from the rocks. Like, row away from the rocks. Get some stuff in place, even if it's hard.
Yeah, that's very smart. Let's shift the conversation completely away from all that for a second. You became an entrepreneur after you became a palliative care doctor later in life. That's an extraordinary transition, an extraordinary step to take. What was that like for you, becoming an entrepreneur and setting up a business?
Yeah. I would never call myself an entrepreneur. I went to a tech team and said, we need these pieces of paper in some form of electronic format that can be found in a hospital so that I don't have to scroll through 38 pages to find the bit about CPR and both boxes are ticked or it's in the ambulance. So it was a problem. And I think I had something in my head saying, if you see the problem, it's yours to solve. Okay. There's that saying, and that was very much my driving factor. It was a big problem for me. I was living it every day and night, half a dozen times a shift. And I discussed it with some of my bosses who said, fix this. I'm seeing this all the time. This is costing us a lot of money, because I actually love our health system. I love what it can do for people, and I don't like seeing it wasted.
Because people are having procedures that they never wanted
they
to
don't
begin
want
with.
Or brutalised by it. Yeah. So let's get rid of what we don't need first, and that I mean that in the nicest possible way. Yeah. Don't do the wrong thing and do no harm. So for me, it was a matter of, we're doing harm. Here might be a way of solving the problem. So I was a junior doctor at the time. I went to my head of my hospital and said, here's an idea. Here's the techies have built this. We've got a software solution. They said, great idea. Let's try and roll this out through New South Wales. So I got the thumbs up. I wasn't an entrepreneur. I was just a junior doctor with an idea and a piece of software. But at the time, my health record was coming into play, and so it was to be the repository of all medical data. Yep. So everything kind of got paused. Yep. And so it was about time. And do you know what happened? I ended up taking it to the States. somebody said, come over here, pitch this to the CEOs of the group purchasing organizations in the States. And beginner's luck, I got introduced, pitched to 5 CEOs of these GPOs and got a contract.
So you had never pitched
anything
professionally before?
No.
You obviously had spoken to your own hospital.
Yeah.
But here you are like an
total
entrepreneur,
beginner.
pitching.
And then COVID. So the contract fell apart, and then you couldn't talk about death and dying through COVID. So we had this great idea. We had 4,500 people fill in this questionnaire, which I didn't realise was a big number. They just found it, no marketing, and did it. And then someone said, you need to put a price on this to make this sustainable. But you couldn't really do that at the time of COVID. So then we had to figure out a way to make it a enterprise grade, business to business, not business to consumer. And there was some legislation coming in. The Royal Commission was happening at the time, and advanced care plans were being promoted as a way of ensuring people had better quality end-of-life care. And we were like, great. Aged care providers are going to have this. We're now building software for a provider. It's B2B. Excellent. But that legislation is now only coming into play this November. So we were 7 years too early.
Yeah.
And now it's needed by businesses, by Australia, by individual consumers. So I'm not so much as an entrepreneur as somebody who just hung in there.
You and I both were privileged to be part of AUSEP, the Australian Clinical Entrepreneur Program, which is a government-funded accelerator program for doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, clinical practitioners who want to solve a problem, like you just said. I was trying to solve a teaching problem with using virtual reality. You're obviously solving the problem that you've just talked about. They talk about this idea of the MOMS test, the book called The Mom Test, and how do you get people thinking, how do you get objective feedback? It sounds like you got objective feedback by having 4,000 people fill it in and you didn't even realize that was a big number.
I did. But that was not the MUMS test I needed to do at the time. The MUMS test was with providers, so we did certainly use it with providers. They helped us build the thing. But then COVID meant you couldn't pick up a phone and ring an aged care provider for 2 years. It was just like, go away, I'm too busy. But the MUMS test is so important. I've had investors say to me, product market fit, well, people put their hands in their pockets and pay for it. It's so hard as a clinician to get your head around that, because you see the problem, you know you can fix it, but no one will pay for it.
And sometimes you said you have to wait out. So now 7 years later, the timing is coming together.
Yeah, exactly.
Where to for your business and this whole service?
It's for me, well, AI is huge, of course. I found myself talking to one of my heroes last week. There's that saying, most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Yes. This far down the track, I didn't think we'd have what we have. But I found myself talking to a hero last week. He is Dr. Charlie Cork. He's a well-known ICU specialist. He's talked about advanced care planning. He's doing AI and avatars. And, these people with years and years of clinical experience are now leading the way in AI and digital. Bringing that together is totally exciting. So partnering up with other people is the only way to go. It's the only way to go. So looking for partners to deliver person-centered care, and that's a word that's overused, but we actually have a consumer portal where there's other people who've said things like, this is my story, I had trauma, and now every time I go in to give birth, every time there's a change of midwife, I have to restate my trauma, that not just emotional trauma, but why I've only got one leg or something like that. Yeah. So getting people's stories as important as their medical data and shared in a way we call it interoperably right throughout the healthcare centre. I think you need to partner up with people. There's
no other way to do it.
No.
Yeah, because the system is too complex and too interconnected.
Yeah. So you sort of, we talk about a niche, you've got to have your niche, but then a niche is not scalable. I mean, I might be wrong there, but I don't think it is. You need lots of niches to have a coordinated...
If you want to have impact at a bigger scale, for sure.
Yeah.
What strikes me talking to you today is going back to the earlier piece around you started medical study at age 51. A lot of us start slowing down in our 60s or 70s, and maybe for a lot of us, maybe even a lot earlier, you seem to be gearing up. How do you maintain your drive and your creativity?
Oh, I would die without creativity. I like to write poems. I have always written things. I think I've probably wasted a lot of energy over the years fussing around doing things that were not my story, were other people's stories, needs, challenges. I jump in, and so if I can only focus on me, I know that sounds selfish, but my needs, drives, challenges, and not get in other people's business, I've got a lot more energy.
The original meaning of the word selfish was, how do I take care of myself?
Right.
As in what's important for me, right? As opposed to I'm taking stuff from me which violates you. It's about how do I nourish me? What's important for me? And what I love about what you just said is if I get clear on what's important for me and spend time there, it nourishes me. I get more energy. I get more creative. I do more things. If you think about the impact you're having now, you have an impact on a huge amount of other people. The ripple effect is ginormous in terms of the family conversations that can happen, the waste in the hospital system that doesn't have to happen. And it starts with you taking care of you. And I think that's extraordinary.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I love that.
Isn't that interesting? I think there's, that means if all I have to do is take care of me and everyone else is, then I'm letting everyone else take, I'm not in their business because I'll probably screw it up if I do that. Then you're only a piece of a jigsaw puzzle.
That's right.
That's all we are.
Yeah.
But you have to be the right piece.
Yeah. In our business here, Don't Let the Old Man In, one thing we talk about is how do you live gracefully or disgracefully in the second half of life, but do it on your own terms, as in choose, right? Choose what's important for you and take steps towards it. You certainly are someone who's proving that you can do that time and time again and reinvigorate yourself along the way. What would the 75-year-old version of Merran Cooper be asking of her now if she had a voice in this conversation?
So what would the 75-year-old version of Merran Cooper be asking me now as a 65-year-old?
Correct. Yeah.
I would be asking, well, hopefully I wouldn't be asking myself anything. I would be saying, thank you. Thank you for looking after yourself, because now I'm not a burden on anybody, or less chance of being a burden. Because that matters, doesn't it? We don't want to burden those we love, even though they say it's okay. I would hopefully be saying thank you for continuing to do your stretches so that I can play with my grandchildren and run after them. I would be saying thank you for not wasting money and giving me a little bit more to keep me going, happiness, health, fitness to do the things you want. I would not be saying thank you for buying more clothes or a bigger house, or thank you for eating more expensive, or thank you for the wine that you've built up. I would be saying thank you for doing your stretches and some strength work probably. And thank you for trying new things and keeping your brain alive, if I'm lucky enough to be healthy.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. That's wise wisdom there. But more importantly, thank you for reinventing yourself. Yeah, I really admire what you've done and how you've done it, and the fact that you're still doing it. Because, as I said, the ripple effect is phenomenal. And I would imagine for yourself, you won't always know the ripple effect, because the conversations are happening in places that you don't even know they're happening. But they're happening. That's the important thing. As we finish up, Merran Cooper, is there any last words of wisdom you'd like to share with our audience?
The words impermanence and imperfect are important to me, because impermanence means we are all the same. We're all impermanent. That is what we share. So or whether you are a successful tech billionaire or not, you're impermanent. And that doesn't make anybody different to the next person. Although there is this search for longevity, but you're impermanent. And we're all imperfect, of course. So that is what gives us an opportunity to speak despite imposter syndrome. I'm imperfect. I don't claim I'm imperfect. This too will pass. I give it my best shot. It gives you license to have a crack. When you know everybody's impermanent, everybody's imperfect, and so am I, and I'll have a go. That's all.
Perfect. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
It's lovely to speak with you, Paul. It's been fun.
Thanks.
You.
And we will share in our notes access to your website and details, and also that code for anyone who wants to do that self-reflection questionnaire. I really encourage it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that conversation with Merran Cooper, and I so appreciate her honesty and vulnerability in terms of sharing with us her early stories about taking care of her husband while he was dying and then his own death, but also the decision she made to become a doctor in her 50s and the subsequent learning she had as someone with a lot of experience, life experience, a lot of maturity, moving into a university system with folks who were 30 years younger than her, and how she navigated the healthcare system as a doctor in becoming a palliative care specialist. So a few thoughts from me. The first thing that really jumped out at me is this phrase or this mantra, be a soul, not a role. And I love that because it talks to humanity. It talks to us being our best and being our most useful human being next to another human being. In caring for her dying husband at 23, Merran discovered the power of dropping the mask. As she says, not being the strong partner or not being the fixer or not being the brave one, but just being simply the human one. My background is coaching, consulting, and anybody in the helping profession, be it coaches, consultants, therapists, everyone's taught to learn their lessons, i.e. learn the theories, learn the constructs, learn all of those ideas, and hopefully learn them well, but to put them aside in the face of a real person. I think Carl Jung said that, i.e. be a great human being with another person is what truly works in any kind of helping role. Yes, the frameworks are useful. Yes, all of the theories are useful. Hopefully you'll understand how to apply the right one at the right time, etc. But put them aside when you're with somebody and just be with that person. You know, as men, I think we spend decades performing roles. You know, some of us are fathers, some of us are providers, some of us are husbands or partners, some of us are bosses in a workplace. But the most healing and liberating work often comes when we strip those roles away and we show up as ourselves, just a human being, hopefully a great human being, happy to help, happy just to be there. And so this notion of our role and soul, I really have been thinking that a lot since I spoke to Merran, and I want to keep that at the top of my mind when I'm navigating, important conversations or important events. How do I make sure that I'm showing up here as a soul and not just in my role? The second that struck me, and this is not new, I'm sure, for anybody, but grief is messy. It just is, right? And that's okay. It's not okay. It feels messy, but it's okay that it is. Like, we don't need to try and change it because we won't be able to anyway. After her husband's death, Merran says she fell into a hole. And she realized later there are no clean stages of grief, just waves and fragments of grief. She referred to C.S. Lewis, who wrote A Grief Observed, and it helped her that even the wise people, like the really great writer C.S. Lewis, even he talked about the mess of a loss and the mess of grief and allowed her to go, okay, I'm okay. It's not just me. Even he talks about this. And she's right. Grief is messy. Grief is messy for everybody. So just know that it is. And I think for us as men, we often have a role to fix stuff. Our DNA is to, when our partners say, hey, this is a problem, let me come in and fix it for you. That's my role. I'm good at fixing, particularly if our work orientation, the job we have is to fix stuff. We come home and we fix stuff. But the thing about grief is there's no tidy sequence. You know, it's not there to be fixed. It's there to be sat with. So the learning for me is sitting with grief is not weak. Sitting with grief is realistic. Sitting with grief is human. And the objective here is to sit with it, sit in it, know that grief just takes time to dissipate. Grief does so at its pace, not my pace, not your pace. Someone said to me a long time ago, and I've never forgotten this, grief often feels like a large cloak wrapped around you, and it gradually just gets smaller and smaller over time, and eventually it feels like a small little piece of cloth sitting there. It doesn't go away. It just gets smaller and it dissipates over time, i.e., there's nothing to fix. Grief is messy, but we can sit with it. It will dissipate, but we can't fix it. The third thing for me, and I love this is a recurring theme of my conversations, it's a recurring theme of this whole podcast series, and that is it's never too late to start something new. And Merran is a great example of this. She started studying medicine at 50, 32 years after she was first offered a place. And she was surrounded by 21-year-olds, and she learned to shut up and listen, because she discovered she had enormous curiosity, enormous amount of experience, and huge stamina. And she became a palliative care doctor, taking care of people with cancer, taking care of people who were dying, honoring her husband who had died in his 20s. And she did that in her late 50s. But that didn't stop there. She recognized an issue in the healthcare system, and in her 60s, she is now trying to solve for that. And the reflection for me and the reflection for this whole podcast series again and again and again and again is the same. It's never too late to start. It's never too late to start again. Reinvention is not about chasing status. Reinvention is about staying awake to what still excites you. It's about staying awake to allow something to excite you. Curiosity keeps us young. Experimentation allows you to try stuff. If you don't like it, so what? It was an experiment. But if you do like it, it might open the door to a new opportunity. It might open the door to a new way of thinking. It might open the door to a new way of being. And for some of us, it might open the door to a new way of living life, a new way of doing something that you only have ever dreamed of. This whole podcast emerged from an experiment that I ran in COVID for me. I was in lockdown. I had sold my business in December 2019, and in February I decided I want to learn how to podcast, and suddenly in March, Australia went into lockdown because of COVID. So I thought, let me take some time. Let me go and do some courses. I did some courses on the technical sides of podcasting. I did some courses with Seth Godin on the marketing side of podcasting. I just learned about podcasting. And I had a lot of ideas about what do I want to do a podcast about. This podcast happened to be my first idea, but I put it on the burner for later. And I started with a podcast all about leadership. The Leadership Diet became that podcast. And in that, I interviewed a whole range of leaders on how they learned to be senior level leaders. I put a lot of time into that podcast, but I had a lot of time. We were all in lockdown, but it became fun. And surprisingly for me, the podcast became ranked in the top 10 business podcasts in Australia, in Singapore, in Malaysia, and for 1 week in Denmark. Now that was fun. But here's the point. It pushed me to consider reinvention. I didn't start on day one going, I'm going to reinvent myself, but I experimented with different things. I had fun along the way. And the reinvention is what you're now listening to. This podcast is a reinvention. So what I loved about Merran's story is it's never too late to start something. It's definitely never too late to reinvent yourself. Another point that she made, and this really hit home for me, and this is the message of her whole business. Advanced care planning is an act of love. She calls it a love letter to the people who matter most to you. And that's what hit me. It's been really important. Now, some of us, we have aging parents, and some of us might decide on the back of this conversation to have one conversation with our parents. It's not about their death per se. It's about sparing their family, your family, confusion, guilt, conflict when that time comes. And it doesn't have to be a hard conversation. I love the fact that she says, talking about death is like talking about sex. Now, I never heard that before, but she says, and she encourages us to talk at the edges, start at the edges. Begin with a gentle opening. Mom, if you had a fall, what would you want me to tell the doctors? Because big conversations don't have to be heavy. They need to be real, they need to be authentic, and they need to just open the door. Hence, start at the edges. For everybody else listening to this, whether you're 30 or 40 or 50 or 60, the conversation actually is one that starts with yourself. You know, how might you like to be treated in the event of a serious illness or accident? I know for me, I'm very happy to have certain organs donated. I filled in my organ donation card. But if I ever, hopefully it'll never happen, but if I ever get involved in a serious accident, I also want to know, and I want my family to know, there are certain medical interventions I don't want. So on the back of this conversation, I'm documenting that so my family know, so they don't have to make a tough decision for me. I'm making that for myself. Which leads me to my last reflection, and this is one I think we're going to come back to again and again and again in this podcast, and that is this. Self-care is not selfishness, it's stewardship of me. Merran defines selfishness as this. If I take care of me, I have more to give to others. Her energy comes from focusing on her own story, not fixing everybody else's story. And for me, the lesson I'm taking from this conversation with Merran Cooper is stop pouring energy into other people's battles. The most generous thing you can do is to stay healthy, stay curious, and to stay engaged with yourself. We need to make sure as we are getting older that we stay healthy. And that's physically healthy, it's psychologically healthy, it's relationship healthy. You know, what boundaries are important for us in our relationships? We've got to make sure our last decade is as enjoyable as it can be. You know, longevity and lifespan are only as good as how healthy we are in that lifespan. Ideally, lifespan and health span are the same thing. For me personally, I've recently undertaken a proper health review with a proper health scan that gives me body fat percentages, visceral fat percentages, even a biological age. By the way, it was 1 year older than my real age, not 1 year younger. That's next year. And I'm now training to change some of those numbers. Not because I'm selfish, because I want to take care of myself. Because what I've realized is no one else will do it unless I do it. And if I do it, then I can take care of other people. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Merran Cooper. It stirred for me a lot of ideas, some surprising ideas, with some core actions. And on the back of that, I'm taking some stuff on for me that hopefully won't let the old man in.